Hey guys, so right now I'm going to be making the introductory video here for this playlist that focuses on only the more organized and focused videos in the Bible Basics 6A series that we have up on the channel. So we're going to real briefly actually walk through the videos that are up in this series. So unlike the full series where we don't actually have all of the videos from especially the early weeks titled, I do have titles for all of the videos later on in the series once we got focused. So we're actually going to go ahead and go through exactly what content this series goes over. So we're going to start by chunking things into groups. So the first group that we're going to talk about is these first three videos here. Now each of the groups that we go over here is largely standalone. So if you want to only watch some of the videos in this series, you can mostly watch the groups that we go over in this video. And if you watch the groups independently, you don't necessarily have to go in order, although it does help because, of course, the study has been laid out that way. So first group we're going to go over is these first three videos. So the first video talks about confession, forgiveness, avoiding self-loathing, and reorienting towards God after we fall. So this is talking about recovering from sin after we have fallen a single time. Second video kind of talks about our wider struggle with sin in the long term. And then the third video here talks about the opposite of these two, which is dealing with spiritual defeat, dealing with when we stumble and fall, but it talks about spiritual victory and exactly what that means and the consequences of our faith in terms of how our faith is our victory in overcoming the world. So these videos here are kind of tying up a section in the study before we go into the recap section. So first three videos form a group. The next, oh gosh, I don't know how many. You see the fourth video here. This one, we start out this next group by revisiting the idea that kind of bookends this entire study of the Christian life being a walk, a pilgrimage to Zion that we go on. And so we revisit that idea and then we recap many of the points that we have made throughout the earlier videos in the study. And so this section right here, so this video all the way down through the video down here where we recap all of these points. So that's what, 15 videos or so. All of these are almost review videos of points that we made in the 50 some odd weeks preceding when we kind of got more serious about organizing things. And so I'm not going to go through all of these videos, but many of these are important summary points that we pull from this study, things that we talked about in earlier videos, kind of all brought back up here, gone over in more of a summary fashion. And I'll read a couple, things that are really important. So for example, this point here of us not taking things personally in this life on the spiritual battlefield, recognize that we are in hostile enemy territory. That's a very core, critical part of the military analogy that we spent a lot of time on in earlier weeks in this study. And then what's another good one here? Talking about offense and defense and the importance of offense and spiritual growth, maintaining that positive attitudes towards growing in the truth. Spiritual momentum, talking about the difference between the theoretical and the practical in the Christian life. All of these things, many summary points, going over things that we talked about earlier on in the study. And so, in fact, these 15 videos or so picking up from the fourth video, after we finish the discussion of spiritual victory, picking up framing things in terms of the pilgrimage analogy, and then all of the things for us to keep in mind as we go on our pilgrimage to Zion. This is an excellent summary section, 15 or 16 or so videos, all talking about very important points of truth for us to keep in mind as we go through this life as Christians. So that's a long section here. And then after that, the next group, so the first group was the first several videos. The next group was all of these summary points going back over things that we had previously talked about in our group Bible study of this 6-part of the Bible Basics series. The next group is 3 videos. So these videos, the first one is going over the idea of word studies. So tracing specific Greek and Hebrew words and the importance, kind of the utility of doing that, as well as some pitfalls from perhaps overemphasizing the utility of this and kind of getting a swelled head by just looking at lexicons and things. And then we brought that up specifically because we were doing a deep dive into the spiritual growth vocabulary that's present in the Greek of the Ephesians 4 verses 11 through 16 passage that talks about the church growing up, knitting itself together in love, right, as each member of the body of Christ does its work. So we hit this passage really hard, read it in English, and then we go through and examine many of the Greek words behind things in this passage. So how the body knits itself together and builds itself up. So we talk about those verbs and adjectives relating to those processes. So interesting section describing the vocabulary that goes into spiritual growth. Very vocab Greek focused section here. And then, this passage again in Ephesians 4:11 through 16. Actually, I think I said 3 videos, it's 4 videos. So the introduction to word studies, the introduction to the passage, and then where we talk about all of the vocabulary in the passage. And then that brings us into the next section of the study, which goes through many analogies for spiritual growth. And so each one of these analogies does stand alone reasonably well, but if you want to get the full view, you can watch all of these videos that talk about spiritual growth analogies. So I'm not going to spend too much time going over all of these individually, but first one we went through was the physical body analogy. So growing spiritually kind of in the same way as we grow and mature from infancy into adults, as our bodies do as humans. Then we talked about the athletics analogy. So you can think of in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 24 and following, when Paul talks about running the race as Christians. Spiritual growth as this athletics analogy, running so as to win the prize. And then we talk about spiritual growth analogies as the plant analogy. So us growing and bearing fruit as Christians. So you might think of the parable of the vine in John chapter 15, as well as the parable of the sower. So we hit that in the second video of these 3 here, talking about the idea of us growing and bearing fruit as Christians. And so parable of the sower, very good outlining structure for understanding the approaches that people have to spiritual growth in this life. And we want to be that plant that yields 30, 60, and 100-fold, a bountiful harvest, producing spiritually, so that we can get a well done, good and faithful servant on that day of days. So that's the plant analogy. After that, we talk about the building analogy. So Peter, I believe it's in 1 Peter chapter 2, talks about kind of us being built up into the edifice for God. This is as individual believers, as stones in this building. This actually hits some of the concepts that we went over in that earlier section discussing spiritual growth vocabulary, because we looked at that idea of building therein as well. But this is the building analogy for spiritual growth. And then perhaps the analogy that this particular study, Bible Basics 6A off Ichthus, spends the most time. In fact, that is the outline in its structure, goes off of the military analogy. So we have 3 videos for this. You can see these got rather long. I've been trying to keep the videos a little bit more split up, but these in particular, very, very, very important analogy for us understanding our role as Christians here in the devil's world on the spiritual battlefield that we face. Still in this wider section going over analogies for spiritual growth. And then finally, last one, only a single video on this, is the idea again of that pilgrimage analogy for us as Christians. So as pilgrims on the road to Zion, walking through this life, the path that God has set before us. So the straight and narrow way rather than the easy path which leads away from God, right? The pilgrimage analogy, another powerful analogy for us to view our lives as Christians kind of in the proper biblical way here. And then, so finally, last section, after we finally finish, you see many, many videos here about the idea of spiritual growth analogies, although each individual analogy, like I said, is reasonably standalone. Towards the very end, we pick up talking about biblical role models. Specifically, we focused on mostly believers from the Old Testament. So in the first video there, we went over Enoch, Noah, and Abraham in this video. And then in the second one, we talk about Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Job, and David. But all of these people, and of course Jesus, as well as our ultimate and final role model, modeling the behavior that we ought to emulate as Christians. But we all, of course, spend time talking about the utility of role models for us as believers and what that means for us. But this is the last section in the study here. And just to close out this content introduction video here. All of the videos that you see in this playlist, again, these are the videos from the wider Bible Basics 6a series that we have up on the channel. These are the more focused, organized ones. So the ones that I think more people will probably find useful, because the earlier videos, we just hadn't taken as many pains to be organized in our discussion. And so these videos that we have gone over here are just generally shorter, more on topic, kind of more focused on each individual point at hand, and I did a better job splitting them up. So this has just been a brief content introduction to all of the videos and topics that you might find in this particular playlist. So with this being said, like I said, you are welcome to not necessarily watch all of these videos in order if you're interested in specific topics. You can go ahead and go through any of the groups that we've talked about here today, because each one of the groupings is reasonably standalone. Although, like I said, if you have the time and you're interested, going through everything in order will give you that bigger picture. So I hope you found this brief content introductory video to be useful, and we'll see you all next time.